Hey, what's up, lifewithoutpants here with another Path of Exile video, and in today's video we're going to talk about crafting in Path of Exile 2. Now there's a lot of people who are new to Path of Exile 2, maybe you've come from Path of Exile 1, maybe you come from Diablo 4, maybe you're new to ARPGs in general, but crafting is a big part of these games. Now they have full trade, so you can just trade for the items you want instead of making them yourself. I always find it's much more satisfying to make them myself. But this is going to function as a new player's guide for people who have just come into this, people who've come from Path of Exile 1, like me, or if you've played Path of Exile 2 already, somehow maybe we're at one of the events and you want to just get a little bit ahead for Friday, then this is going to be the video for you. So for this video, I'm going to be using this thing here. This is called Path of Exile. This is kind of like a crafting simulator that you can find. I'll put a link in the description below, and we can use it to just play around with the crafting materials in Path of Exile 2, and it will allow us to undo things, to go back, to mess around with things that could perhaps be very, very costly in game, but for free, which is always great. So first of all, we need to talk about rarity in Path of Exile. Now there are 4 basic tiers of rarity. So you've got white items or normal items, and those are ones without any affixes. You have magic items, which are also called blue, and the reason they're called blue is just because of the color of the text. You'll see in a second. Magic items have 2 affixes on them, so they have a maximum of 1 prefix and 1 suffix, but you can also have just 1 suffix or just 1 prefix. And then we have rare items, which are yellow, and those have up to 3 prefixes and 3 suffixes. They can also have just 1 prefix or just 1 suffix, but it's a little bit difficult to get to that state. And then we have unique items or orange items, and those have a number of affixes. They're not really prefixes or suffixes on unique items, and we're not going to cover those too much because unique items are basically unique items and there's not much you can do to them. So let's start off talking about we find a bow on the floor and we want to change it. We want to say we're a bow character. We'll go through a few different things as well, but just say we're a bow character and we want to craft on this bow that we found. Now this one here has 6% increased move speed on it, but it is a white item, as you can see from the text here. And that's just because this is what is called an implicit modifier. So some things that you find on the ground, they may have an implicit modifier, and that's just it just goes under this item level and requirements section here on when you mouse over it. And this is something that this will basically always have. So whether it's a normal item, a rare item, or a magic item, it will always have this increased move speed here for this particular bow. Different items have different things. You could get maybe a body armor with 12% resistances. I think that's the Sacred Mail or something like that. But first of all, we're going to try and turn this into a magic item, and we're going to do that using an Orb of Transmutation. So an Orb of Transmutation upgrades a normal item to a magic item, and I have all these things here. So we're just going to start off with the Transmute, and this is PoE PoE2 DB. So this is a great place this is like a lot of data mined stuff in here. You can go and see all the character classes and all that kind of stuff if you want to have a look at what's known about the game so far. So this just upgrades a normal item to a magic item with 1 modifier. Now this sandbox environment here has a little bug in it, so sometimes it adds 2 modifiers when it upgrades from normal to magic, but we're just going to chuck this on and see what we get. So we did get 2 here, so I'm just going to see if I can remove one of these. There we go. So this is what we got. We got adds an amount of physical damage. So we got a phys damage addition here, and that was what we got from using our transmute. So from normal to magic, we now got magic item or a blue item, and you can see here the color of the text has changed. So a lot of the time you're going to probably want to transmute a lot of things. If you are wandering through the campaign, you have a lot of white items on. That's you could have all this extra physical damage. If we undo this, we're at 71 to 127 physical damage right now, and we start off with 44 to 67. So it's doubled pretty much. It's doubled our damage just by using a transmute on it. So I'm just going to take that off, and oh, we got something similar again. So this is how you turn normal items into magic items. And you can see here, this is, maybe you can see here, this has got a prefix modifier on it. And there are different prefixes and suffixes. And there's a base mod pool. There's a bunch of modifiers that are prefixes and a bunch of modifiers that are suffixes. And there's different ways to get to those two modifiers. When you use a transmute, it's going to be random. It's 50-50 which one you get. So you might get a, if you're using a warhammer, you might get a warhammer with fire resistance as a suffix, and that's, that's going to suck a bit. So in general, defensive modifiers like armor, evasion, life, they are prefixes, and damage modifiers are generally prefixes as well. And attribute modifiers are, and resistances, these are usually suffixes. Now, this could change in Path of Exile 2. We purely don't know yet, but we're just talking about crafting in general here. So if you got your, say you got a bow and you had just dexterity on it, purely dexterity. If you're a bow character, you probably got a lot of dexterity already. Maybe the dexterity is not very useful and you want to add on a prefix to your magic item. You can use an Orb of Augmentation, and an Orb of Augmentation adds an additional random property. And magic items can only have one prefix and one suffix. And if we've got one suffix, then the Augmentation Orb can only add a prefix. If we had one prefix, it could only add a suffix. So if we use this Orb of Augmentation on our bow here, then you can see here, we got some fire damage. So our DPS has gone up by a significant amount. So if we got elemental DPS of 98 here, it says, or total DPS of 176. And if we just undo that, we were down at 78 total DPS. So we can, and you can just undo and keep doing this and see what you get. It's a really, really useful way to get used to crafting, honestly. So we've got some increased in physical damage, we've got some lightning damage here, we've got some lightning damage again, more lightning damage. Wow, we're super good at getting lightning damage, and then some fire damage. So this is a way to mess around with the transmutes and the orgs. The next thing, transmutes and orgs is that sort of shorthand term for Path of Exile 1 players, but the next thing we would do in Path of Exile 2 is we would want to use a Regal Orb. And a Regal Orb, I think we've got this one here, maybe I've got it here somewhere. So a Regal Orb upgrades a magic item to a rare item. And there's something it's not telling us here, which is, I think that it will always upgrade it from 2 modifiers to 3. We'll find out though. We'll find out on Friday, but it looks like that in the game. So this is a way for our magic items to get turned into rare items, and for that we're going to just throw this on here. And we got an extra cold damage. We've got an extra prefix. Now, magic items can only have 2 affixes, 1 prefix, 1 suffix. Rare items can have 6 affixes, so they can have 3 prefixes and 3 suffixes. And they can have, any number between 3 and 6 affixes in total. So you could have 3 prefixes and 1 suffix. Or you could have 3 suffixes and 1 prefix, or 2 prefixes, or whatever. So we got some fire damage and some cold damage here. Our bow's looking pretty good, to be honest. At this point, I would want to use an Exalted Orb, which I think is here. And an Exalted Orb, it augments a rare item with a new random modifier. So it basically adds a modifier to this. So if we select this, this is just going to keep adding stuff. And if it's prefixes, then it's generally going to be, on a bow, is generally going to be damage modifiers of some variety, or on a weapon of any type. So prefixes on weapons are generally damage modifiers, and suffixes on weapons can be resistances or attributes. There are also some damage types as well for suffixes, but we're going to use this Exalted Orb and see what we get. We got extra lightning damage. This bow is actually really good. this would be a fantastic bow right now. So we've added it on our Exalted Orb, and we got another prefix. So we went from 2 prefixes to 3 prefixes. And we still got this dexterity on, which is frustrating because we probably don't need that at all. But then, you can use this again and again. And we got some accuracy rating, which is generally quite useful. If you're a bow character, you want the accuracy. And then global critical strike multiplier. I think this is called something different in Path of Exile 2. I think this is just critical strike damage bonus or something more generic rather than multiplier. So we ended up with a fairly decent bow, and maybe we want to get rid of some of these modifiers. Maybe we want to remove some of the suffixes. And for that we have 2 options, and we can use either the Chaos Orb or the Orb of Annulment. Now, an Orb of Annulment just removes a modifier. That's all it does. It can remove whichever, like it could be your best one. So maybe we'll have that happen to us. So we just click on the Orb of Annulment, and we're going to annul off something. We annulled off, what was that? The global critical strike multiplier, so that's maybe not too good if you're a crit based build. We can hit it again, and we annulled off our cold damage, so the damage on the bow has gone down. We can do it again, and we annulled off the fire damage, and this is looking pretty depressing. And then we find that we got rid of the accuracy, which is also very frustrating, and we're left with a dex bow when we use the 5th one. So it's just a bow with some extra dex now. So then you would probably want to just exalt on a bunch of stuff, and now we've got a bow of similar sort of caliber to the one before. We've got some fizz damage, fizz leeches life, extra fire damage, that kind of stuff. So an Orb of Annulment just removes a random modifier from an item, and when it says a random modifier, it can never remove the implicit. It can only remove prefixes or suffixes. So that's what the Orb of Annulment does. And then we've got the Chaos Orb, and the Chaos Orb is, it's in Path of Exile 1, it would re-roll the whole item into who knows what. In Path of Exile 2, it just removes one modifier and then adds a new one. So if we use the Chaos Orb here, then we can see it removed the projectile speed that we had and then added on crit multi. So we could keep using the Chaos Orb, and it's just it's like taking an annul and an exalt all in one item. So if we do it again, if we hit it again, we got rid of our physical damage to attacks, and we added on the lightning damage. This has actually increased the damage of our bow, which is pretty nice. Maybe we get rid of the dexterity at some point. We reduced our accuracy and added on cold resistance. Not too useful on a bow. And we hit it once more, and then we removed our fire damage and added 0.31% of physical damage leached as mana. And that's not very useful at all. So we can keep going. Oh, we actually removed the dex finally. We got cold res, accuracy, and projectile speed. So here we got just using the, if you just click as much as you want using the Chaos Orb, you can see it just randomly removes one item and adds on another one. And you could probably make a decent bow with this. But it's very, very, very random. So that's the Chaos Orb. It does kind of what it says on the tin. Now we've got to talk about an Orb of Alchemy as well. So let's restart. In fact, no, let's make another crafting project. So we've got some. Let's make some boots. Let's say intelligence boots. Is this just? Oh no, let's go to the emulator. So we can make some intelligence boots. Let's say we're going to make some scholars boots because we're so smart. So here we have found some scholars boots on the floor. These are, we're going to talk about quality a little bit later, 20% quality, but if we want to cut out the middleman and go straight from a normal item to a rare item, then there's another item we can use called the Orb of Alchemy, and that just straight upgrades a normal item to a rare item. And I think it, based on the wiki, I believe it does it with 4 modifiers as well. Yeah, so there's 4 modifiers for this. So if we hit it, then we get some energy shield, maximum life, very useful, maximum mana, very useful if you're an intelligence based build to get a lot of mana, and then some intelligence, again pretty useful. And then from here we can, now we've got a rare item, we can exalt it a couple of times as well, so we get some increased energy shield, get chaos resistance, that's always super useful. And then we got this 6 tier 6 increased energy shield, it's not too great, and tier 7 intelligence. So we got 2 modifiers out of 6, which aren't that great. And what we could try to do is use a Chaos Orb for a 1 in 3 chance to add something decent. Let's try it out. We didn't. We removed off the maximum mana, which maybe is not so useful for our intelligence-based build, but we added on movement speed, which is probably very useful for all builds. I think survivability in Path of Exile 2 is going to be very, very important, and movement speed is going to be a big part of that. So this is the very, very basic stuff in crafting, and I think now we're going to talk about quality, omens, meta mods, and we're going to tie it off with some sockets. So let's get to that. Alright, so for quality, this can be a very, very useful statistic. In Path of Exile 1, they just changed the way quality works from it being additive to multiplicative. So that had a very big effect, and it meant that quality is very, very important to get on a lot of things. So if you have a pair of gloves and you have a lot of evasion on those gloves, if you add quality, then you'll get more evasion. If you have a body armor, it has a lot of armor on it, then you're adding quality to that armor will improve the quality, and it will mean you're more tanky, or mean you're more evasive, or mean you have more energy shield. And again, defenses, I think, in Path of Exile 2 are going to be super important. So the most basic forms of quality come from armorer's scraps, which increase the quality on your boots, your gloves, your helmet, your body armor, and then blacksmith whetstones, which improves the quality of martial weapons. And what is a martial weapon? It's basically a weapon you actually like go up and punch the enemy with or attack with. So monks, they're going to be using martial weapons, warriors are going to be using martial weapons, but a quarterstaff that you use to cast spells with is not a martial weapon. A wand is not a martial weapon, usually. And then there's a third type of quality available for those types of things, so wands, staffs, or scepters, and that's called the Arcanist's Etcher. This is a new one for Path of Exile 2, and you can use these to get the quality on your weapons up to 20%, which generally provides a noticeable boost to, if you're using blacksmith whetstones, then it's a fairly noticeable boost to physical damage. And if you're using armorer's scraps, I think you can get up to 20% more defenses from the armor and evasion and energy shield on your equipped gear using armorer's scraps. So super useful to apply. The way it used to work was you would get 5% quality on a normal item, 2% on a magic, and 1% on a rare or unique. And the way it works now, in Path of Exile 1 at least, is that you get it's up to 20% at low item levels with just 1. So very useful to throw on your gear as soon as you get it. Even if you think, I'm probably going to lose this piece of gear, I'm probably going to throw away this piece of gear in the next 2 days or 2 hours or 2 minutes, it's probably always useful to throw some armor scraps on your gear, because the amount of quality and the amount, therefore, of defenses you get early on, very, very useful. So this is the generic kind of quality. There's also these other kind of quality. Gem Cutter's Prisms improves the quality of a gem. We don't yet know what quality will add to gems, but it's a very safe bet to think that it's generic sort of damage. So if it's Comet that you're using, then it's probably going to increase the amount of cold damage. Or if you're using Fireball, then it's probably going to increase the amount of fire damage. There's lots and lots of axes that you can use Gem Cutter's Prisms to tweak on different skill gems, and some of them, they maybe increases the cast or reduces the cast time to make it easier to cast it a lot faster, or maybe just increases the damage, or maybe it increases the amount of defense that a buff gives you, or the effectiveness of the curse that you're using on your enemies. There's lots of different things, and we just don't know what they all are yet, but Gem Cutter's Prisms, they're quite sort of high-end, like end-game kind of stuff. So you probably don't need to worry about that too much until much later on. There's also these catalysts catalysts. Now, catalysts are they're a Path of Exile 1 system. They're coming into Path of Exile 2. They're called different things now. They come from Breach instead of, in Path of Exile 1, they came from a mechanic called Ultimatum. And that would have you fighting a boss called the Trial Master. And that's probably the second sort of ascension thing. I think it's called the Trial of Chaos in Path of Exile 2. So they've removed catalysts from this old mechanic called Ultimatum, and they've put them onto Breach now, so you can get these catalysts, and it improves a certain type of modifier on rings or amulets. Now, they used to do it on rings, amulets, and belts, but it seems now that they're just doing it on rings and amulets. And there's we've only been given, I think it's, if we just search for catalyst here, I think we've only got 4 catalysts to see so far. So that's the Flesh Catalyst, which is going to enhance life modifiers, the Reaver Catalyst, which is going to enhance attack modifiers, Tools Catalyst, which is cold modifier, and Zophs, which is going to enhance fire modifiers. Now, if I had to guess, I would say there's going to be Chayula's Catalyst, which is going to increase chaos modifiers as well. There's probably going to be a few more, and these can do up to 20% quality on rings and catalysts, on rings and amulets rather. And that means that if you have a amulet with 100 life on it, and you put on enough catalysts to bring it up to 20% quality, say flesh catalysts, then you're going to get 120 life from that amulet instead, which can be quite a big deal. So 20% increased whatever it is can be very, very useful on those items. Again, no belts. We'll see what happens with belts. Maybe they're going to put something else in, but quality on these items is very, very important. For as many items as you can get quality on, you probably want to be putting it on there. Now let's talk about sockets. Sockets are they're not the same as in Path of Exile 1. If you play Path of Exile 1, then you have sockets all over the place. In Path of Exile 2, you're going to have not too many sockets. So you're going to have 1 on your gloves, boots, helmet, and you'll have 2 on body armors, or I think it's martial weapons. And you can see here this screen grab I've got. This is just a helmet or hooded mask, and it's got this big gaping hole in the middle. That's because it has 1 socket. Now, it is possible to actually get 2 sockets on some of these items by using a Vaal Orb. It's one of the Vaal Orb outcomes. If you're a new player, I wouldn't be throwing Vaal Orbs around. It will stop your ability to craft further on an item, and it can brick it. So it can just re-roll the item entirely. There's different Vaal Orb outcomes. I'll probably talk about those in another video, but or maybe we'll have a little section at the end. But for regular items, you can just have they may drop with 1 socket, they may drop with 0 sockets. There is an item that allows you to, if I just search here for socket, so there's an Artificer's Orb, which adds a socket to a martial weapon or armor. And that means that you can, if you have an item and you've crafted a bunch on it, then you can just chuck on one of these Artificer's Orb and it will add a socket if possible. So here you have the fire res and lightning res, and you've got your life, and into the sockets you can put runes, and they're similar but not the same to runes in Diablo 2. There's no rune words. The best part about the rune words was they were so ridiculously overpowered. But in Path of Exile 2, you're going to be able to throw in some runes, and this is kind of their solution to the crafting bench that made designers and players happy. Because I think in the beta test, lots of people were very upset that there wasn't a crafting bench, and the designers were like, yeah, it's great, there's no crafting bench. We're very happy there's no crafting bench, because we don't have to, it's kind of like a bit of a hack. And all the players were upset, and so then they tried it with adding the crafting bench, but then all the designers were upset, but all the players were happy, and then by adding this rune system, everybody became moderately happy. So you have these sockets, you can chuck these runes in, and we got some examples of runes here. So the body rune, if you put it in a martial weapon, it leeches 3% of physical damage as life, and if you put it in an armor, then you get plus 25 to maximum life. And this is seems quite low level. Also, you can notice there's a stack size here as well. So that means that you'll be able to buy, you know, a stack of 30 body runes if you want to. Probably that these are the exact modifiers and they don't change. So this is not, you know, when it says plus 25 to maximum life, it's not in between 20 and 30 maximum life, it's just 25. Then there's the Desert Rune. This adds fire damage in a martial weapon or fire resistance in armor, and this is usually what you would be using the crafting bench for in Path of Exile 1 anyway, is whilst you're going through the campaign you realize, oh, I've got 300 lightning resistance and no cold resistance, so I need to add in some cold resistance. So you probably just chuck in some, you know, glacial runes into all of your body armor slots. So the glacial rune adds cold damage in a martial weapon and add cold resistance if you put it in armor. And the Mind Rune is the last one, and it leeches fizz damage as mana if you put it in a weapon, and adds to maximum mana if you put it in your body armor. So runes are going to be, they're kind of a way to, you know, a stopgap for until you get to later, you know, later on in the end game, and you have like some really decent items. I think obviously these are not the only 4 runes that we're going to get. If you have maxed resistances, then all you're going to be doing is throwing in mana or maximum life, and that doesn't really seem like a useful choice. Path of Exile is very much a game about choices, so I think these are very low tier runes, and I think we're going to get much higher tier of runes either on Friday or, you know, much later on down the line. They're going to introduce some, you know, maybe some unique runes, or there's going to be, I think, a lot of different choices and options available later on. But for now, it's more sort of just a quick solution. So now we're going to have to talk about omens, and omens are, if I just put in omen here, so omens, these come from ritual, and in Path of Exile 1, omens used to do things like, if you use a jeweler's orb on an item, it would give you the maximum number of sockets on that item if the omen was in your inventory, or if you know, there's an omen of blanching which gave you, if you use a chrome on an item, then you get up to 3 white sockets. And there were some other ones, like gives you Soul Eater when you level up, or like 100% increase experience when you level up for 5 minutes, things like that. Omens are back, but they mainly seem to be crafting related at the moment. So we have this Omen of Sinistral Exaltation here. So while this item is active in your inventory, your next Exalted Orb will add only prefix modifiers. So this is the Metacrafting section. And Metacrafting is a system of crafting that is used to increase your odds of getting better outcomes with the other crafting options. So these Omens of Sinistral Exaltation, if you've got 2 good suffix modifiers on an item and you're thinking, I don't want to fill it up on suffixes, I want to just get some prefixes, maybe it's a bow and you want some damage modifiers, then you can use this and it will add only prefix modifiers. The Omen of Dextral Annulment, so whilst this item is active in your inventory, your next Orb of Annulment will remove only suffix modifiers, so this means you can target annul or target remove one of the 2 groups, so you can try to only remove suffix modifiers. That would have been really useful when we were making that bow and we wanted to get rid of that dexterity. And this is, I imagine that these will swap as well, so you'll have an Omen of Dextral Exaltation and you'll be able to only add suffixes, and an Omen of Sinistral Annulment too, and you'll be able to only remove prefixes. So I imagine that these will swap in some way as well. And then you've got an Omen of Greater Exaltation, which is, once it's active in your inventory, your next Exalted Orb will add 2 random modifiers. So obviously this is probably never going to exceed the price of an Exalted Orb. It seems fairly useful already if it drops with sort of great frequency, because as far as I'm aware, Exalted Orbs drop a lot already. In the, you play Act 1 and you come out with 3 or 4 Exalted Orbs, and in Path of Exile 1 that is not the case. That is not the case. You could play up until level 95 and only have 3 Exalted Orbs, but in Path of Exile 2 they are throwing the crafting currencies at you very early on because they want to try and, they want you to use them. I mean, all the crafting currencies are there to be used. So the omens, I think they're looking very, very good for meta mods. I am looking forward to using them. I think now we need to talk about essences. So for essences, there seems to be two types, regular essences and greater essences, and they do one of two things. So the regular essences, they upgrade a normal item to a magic item with a guaranteed modifier. So you might get, we've got a couple here, so Essence of Haste upgrades a normal item to a magic item with 1 speed modifier, so probably you want to use that on a pair of normal boots to get some movement speed on your boots. There's Essence of Ice, so you can get with a cold modifier, so that you could use on a staff or on a on a body armor to get cold resistance. You can Essence of the Body, so it upgrades a normal item to a magic item with 1 life modifier, and that means that you're then going to be in the situation where you have a magic item with something that you wanted on it, like movement speed or cold resistance. And then you can use a greater essence. So that means, and a greater essence upgrades a magic item to a rare item with another guaranteed modifier. And when I say guaranteed modifier, it's more like a modifier group. So in Path of Exile 1, movement speed went from 10% to 35 at 5% intervals. So 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. So if you used an Essence of Haste on a pair of boots in Path of Exile 1, you're going to get either 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, or 35% movement speed. And you probably want to guarantee like a higher tier, or you want a higher tier one because you want to be able to move a lot. And so this means that you might be using a lot of Essences of Haste on a bunch of different boots until you get your 35% or whatever the top tier is. And then you want to start using all the other ones. Maybe if you've got no movement speed on your boots, like I frequently have, by the time I'm still in maps or in the Atlas of Worlds, maybe you want to use just any old Essence of Haste on any old pair of boots, and it's very, very useful. But the greater essences, they're going to upgrade the magic items to rare items with 1 guaranteed modifier. So if you have a greater Essence of Ice, it's going to upgrade your magic item to a rare item with a guaranteed cold modifier. And if you're using it on, say, a weapon, then that means there's a really good way to get, I guess you'd probably get cold damage and cold resistance if you used it on a weapon, so maybe not too useful for that. But if you were trying to make sort of an elemental build where you had a lot of fire damage, or on a bow, actually, a bow's a really good use for this. So you could use an Essence of Ice on your bow to give it cold damage, and then you can use a greater Essence of Haste to give it attack speed, or to give it projectile speed, or something like that. So there's really useful combinations of these, I think, especially greater Essence of the Body and greater Essence of Haste, or just a regular Essence of Haste, is going to be excellent on, say, boots, because then you get life and move speed, which are 2 very useful things to survive with. And then you can exalt on a few other things as well. So that's essences. I want to talk lastly about Vaal Orbs. Now, a Vaal Orb is, as I said before, if you're a new player, you don't want to be throwing Vaal Orbs around. You don't want to do it, because it will brick your item. It will brick your item, but it can do some other very, interesting things. So I think there are 4 outcomes for Vaal Orbs, and they are, the worst one is it completely re-rolls your item. It always corrupts your item. So you always get this corrupted tag on your item, and that means you can't use any crafting currencies on it again, and that's the end state of that item. That item will always look like that. So it always gets corrupted, but it might re-roll the item entirely. So it might, I think it's up to 2 or 3 mods, or I think they reduced it from like all 6 modifiers on a 6 modifier rare item to I think only 3 now. So it can re-roll a bunch of the items on a bunch of the modifiers on your item. It can do nothing. It just corrupts it only, and that's sort of a fairly neutral outcome. It can also add a specific enchantment to your item that could be very beneficial. So one of the ones that's very popular in the current Path of Exile League is called Resolute Technique, and it's a keystone, and it basically means your hits can't be evaded. So monsters can't sort of dodge you, and you would want to get a sword and Vaal that sword, and then hope to get Resolute Technique, and then every attack with that sword cannot be evaded in the future. again, it still means it's corrupted, and it still means you can't craft on it anymore. But Vaal Orbs, and there's a fourth use case as well for unique items. Now, we haven't really talked about unique items too much because this is more of a crafting video, but for unique items, it can also Vaal Orbs can also add a socket as well. That's the one of the more beneficial ones. So Vaaling an item, you could, if it was a body armor, then you could go from the 2 maximum sockets for runes to 3. So that allows you to add in some extra cold damage or some extra or something like that. But for unique items, again, you can add in the socket. So if you had a unique helmet, then the maximum 1 socket could go to 2 sockets. But you can also re-roll the modifier values of the item. So if you had something that had 100 life on it, or let's say 100 fire resistance, which is a very good item. If you had 100 fire resistance, it can, Vaaling it can re-roll the effect of that modifier. And it's not actually re-rolling the numerical value, it's just the multiplier of the value. And this is something that's completely new in Path of Exile 2. So it re-rolls it between, I think it's 0.8 and 1.2. So it's either, it's going to make that modifier worth 80%, somewhere in between 80% of its value and 120% of its value. So if you had something that gives you 100 fire resistance and you Vaal it, it could go up to 120 fire resistance. Or, you know, if you had something, I think Calms is a very popular unique chest from Path of Exile 1, has no sockets in it, but it gives you 1000 life, and if you use a Vaal Orb on it in Path of Exile 2 and it was giving you 1000 life, it could give you 1200, which is, you know, obviously a huge bonus. So Vaal Orbs can have very interesting and desirable outcomes, and a lot of the time they're not. They're really I've had some very unfavorable outcomes with my Vaal Orbs, let's say. Anyway, that's it for this. Oh, we should also talk about Divine Orbs really quickly. Divine Orbs are the last crafting currency. These are probably going to be the most expensive one, and they just re-roll the modifiers, the value of the modifiers. So if we just annul off all of these things here, if we just annul off all of these things here to only have the Chaos Res, let's see if we can do that. Okay, so here we just got the Chaos Res. We've got 26 out of 26 to 30% Chaos Res. Now if we use a Divine Orb, you can see it just re-rolls the number. Now that means that if you have an item that has in between 50 and 100 life, and that's the bracket of where it can roll, using a Divine Orb allows you to re-roll, you know, randomly re-roll once in that bracket. But it re-rolls all of the modifiers on the item. So if we exalt this item, then we use Divine Orbs, you can see they all change pretty much every time. So that's what Divine Orbs are for. They're one of the more expensive things because uniques, especially very expensive uniques, the only way to like modify them in, you know, pretty much any way is to divine them. And some of them have very, very, very powerful effects and a range of how powerful that effect is. So it could be like a Mage Blood has, it takes how many flasks you are using and applies those flasks to you constantly, but it does in between 2 and 4. So when you get a Mage Blood, you would always want to divine it to be 4 flasks because it's just ridiculously powerful to have 4 and a little bit underpowered to have 2. So yeah, that's Divine Orbs, but that's been it for this video. It's been way longer than I thought it was going to be, but there's a lot of crafting in Path of Exile. I'll drop the link to this Path of Exile 2 in the description below. But with that, from me, it's goodbye until the next time. So I hope you are kind to everyone you meet. I love you all very much, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.